Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Inshallah. We'll start in a few minutes. Last a couple seconds, inshallah. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين وصلى الله وسلم وبارك على سيدنا محمد خير الأولين والآخرين وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. اللهم علمنا ما ينفعنا وانفعنا بما علمتنا وزدنا علما. اللهم زدنا ولا تنقصنا وأكرمنا ولا تهنا وأعطنا ولا تحرمنا وآثرنا ولا تؤثر علينا وارض عنا وارضنا يا رب العالمين. ولا حول ولا قوة إلا بالله العظيم. سبحانك لا علم لنا إلا ما علمتنا إنك أنت عليم حكيم. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. And welcome back to the second lesson in the study of the Tafsir of Surah Yusuf. Alhamdulillah, today we have with us a PDF of the presentation that I'm utilizing. Yesterday, I actually didn't realize until the end of the lesson that my screen was not being shared. I thought that you were all following along with me on my screen. But inshallah, today, hopefully, the aesthetics would be a lot better. So we're going to continue our study of the Tafsir of Surah Yusuf. And so I guess to start with sort of a recap, so we know in the Surah Yusuf alayhi salam, that it begins with mention of the fact that Yusuf was having a conversation with his father Yaqub. And in that conversation, alayhi salam, Yusuf has stated that he had a vision, he had a dream. And in that dream, he saw 11 stars and the sun and the moon prostrating to him or bowing down to him. And upon mentioning this to his father said to him, beware that you mention this to your brothers, because your brothers are going to envy you and they may make a plot against you, scheme against you, and try to bring some harm to you. Now, we learned before as well that with respect to the reason why the Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam has suspected this, it had something to do with his knowledge that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would ultimately, of course, make Yusuf a prophet in the future, and then also his observations of his sons and their interactions, and which exhibited or manifested that there was a great envy on the part of the sons of his other wives as opposed to their connection with Yusuf alayhi salam and his brother Binyamin. And in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the surah begins by saying, Alif Lam Ra, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alif Lam Ra, Tilka ayatu kitab mubin, Inna anzalnahu Qur'anan Arabiyya la'allakum ta'qilun, نحن نقص عليك أحسن القصص بما أوحينا إليك هذا القرآن وإن كنت من قبله لمن الغافلين إذ قال يوسف لأبيه يا أبت إني رأيت أحد عشر كوكبا والشمس والقمر رأيتهم لي ساجدين قال يا بني لا تقصص رؤياك على إخوتك فيكيدوا لك كيدا إن الشيطان للإنسان عدو مبين. In the name of God, the benevolent, the merciful, ALR, those are signs of the open book. We revealed it as an Arabic recital so that you would understand. We tell you the best of stories in revealing this recital to you in spite of your former ignorance. Joseph said to his father, I saw 11 stars, father, and the sun and the moon. I saw them bowing to me. He said, don't tell your brothers of your vision, son, lest they plot a scheme against you, for Satan is an open enemy to the human being. وكذلك يجتبيك ربك ويعلمك من تأويل الأحاديث ويتم نعمته عليك وعلى آل يعقوب كما أتمها على أبويك من قبل إبراهيم وإسحاق إن ربك عليم حكيم لقد كان في يوسف وإخوته آيات للسائلين إذ قالوا يوسف وأخوه أحب إلى أبينا منا ونحن أصبة إن أبانا لفي ضلال مبين اقتلوا يوسف أو اطرحوه أرضا يخلو لكم وجه أبيكم وتكونوا من بعده قوما صالحين. This is how your Lord chooses you and teaches you interpretation of stories and fulfills the divine favor on you and on the family of Jacob, as God fulfilled it on your ancestors before, Abraham and Isaac, for your Lord is all-knowing, most wise. And Joseph and his brothers are signs for seekers. They said, Joseph and his brother are dearer to our father than we, and we are a group. Our father is in evident error. Kill Joseph or exile him, that your father may give his attention to you, and after that you will be decent people. One of them said, do not kill Joseph, but throw him in the bottom of the well, where some caravan will pick him up if you are going to act. They said, Father, why don't you trust us with Joseph, since we mean him well? Send him with us tomorrow, so he can roam about and play. We will watch over him. He said, it certainly grieves me that you would go off with him, and I fear the wolf might eat him while you are not minding him. They said, if the wolf were to eat him, when there are so many of us, we all would then surely be lost. Then when they went off with him, they ganged up to put him in the bottom of the well. And we inspired him. You will tell them about this business of theirs, though they do not realize. وجاءوا أباءهم عشاء يبكون قالوا يا أبانا إنا ذهبنا نستبق وتركنا يوسف عند مسائنا فأكله الذئب وما أنت بمؤمن لنا ولو كنا صادقين. Now they came to their father in the evening weeping. They said, Father, we went racing and left Joseph. We left Joseph with our goods, and the wolf ate him. But you won't believe us, even if we are telling the truth. And they put fake blood on his shirt. Their father said, no, this is something you yourselves contrived. But patience is honorable, and God is the one whose aid is to be sought against what you assert. And that's where we ended yesterday. وجاءوا على قميصه بدم كذب قال بل سولت لكم أنفسكم أمرا فصبر جميل والله المستعان على ما تصفون. So they played fake blood on his shirt, trying to convince their father that indeed the wolf had eaten him alive. But they were able to bring his shirt back. And in the commentaries, highlight the fact that the shirt itself did not have any tears in it nor bite holes. And as a result of that, it was one of the ways that Yaqub alayhi salam knew that they were telling a lie. And so he says to him, بَلْ سَوَّلَتْ لَكُمْ أَنفُسُكُمْ أَمْرًا, that this is something yourselves contrived, or this is something that your souls have facilitated for you. In other words, that your souls found it ease, that whatever plot or plan you had against your brother, that your nafs, your anfus, made it possible for you to do this thing, this evil thing that you have done. For sabrun jamil. And so here we notice, of course, that in the life of this prophet, this great prophet Yaqub, which we know as Israel alayhi salam, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he tested him through his sons, through his children. And this is the norm of God's sunnah with the people of righteousness. And we find it in the Quran, that the Quran, when we look at the lives of the great saintly figures and the Anbiya, the Rusul, in the Quran, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala presents them as being people who are challenged by their people or by their families. And they overcome, they bear patiently, endure the tribulations, and then they overcome those tribulations with the right attitude and the right faith in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So for instance, Adam alayhi salam, he's tested with his sons. One of his sons, he kills the other. Nuh alayhi salam is tested with his son as well, and his wife, right? His wife rejects faith in him. His son rejects faith in him. And they had to witness his son being destroyed or being pulled into, washed into the great flood itself, and right before his eyes. And this hurt him, as we know, as the Quran it presents, or it mentions the story of Nuh alayhi salam. Lot alayhi salam was also betrayed by his wife and challenged by his wife. And perhaps the greatest story we see is this one, the story of Yusuf alayhi salam and Yaqub, and that Yaqub himself is being tested by his own very children. And of course, Yusuf alayhi salam is being tested by his brothers, but also tested in other ways. And this is fundamentally what the story is all about. And many great lessons here. So we've seen, of course, the start of the surah, it emphasizes the importance of dreams. Then we saw how it transitioned into the story about the issue or matter of hasad, or jealousy, and how jealousy can turn to hatred, and then hatred itself can lead to murder, or at least the desire to murder or take a life. And if you can't take the life, then you can at least get that person far away from your sight, or the vision or the sight of the individual, or those people who you hope to love or to garner their love and their attention. And so fundamentally, as mentioned yesterday, that you see parallels between what happened with Iblis and what happened with the children of Yaqub alayhi salam, in that Iblis himself wanted Allah's exclusive attention and also felt that he himself was more deserving of the angels' prostration than Adam alayhi salam. In similar fashion, we find when we look at this story that the brothers of Yusuf, brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, that all of them, they similar, they wanted the attention of their father. Of course, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, وَلِلَّهِ الْمَثَلُ الْأَعْلَى, that there's no comparison between Allah and his creation. However, Yaqub alayhi salam being the prophet of God, the great prophet of God, and being their father, they wanted his love and his attention, or at least they wanted to feel it in the same way that they felt that Yusuf and Binyamin had been feeling that love. And so they decided that that Yusuf did not deserve that attention because he was so young and he had not proven his utility, whereas they themselves were a large number of brothers, and they themselves had utility. They can prove that they can of course farm the land, they can care for the crops, they can care for the livestock, they can bring wealth into the family, etc. But they're young. What have they done? What they haven't? Why is he giving so much attention? So, but of course, they don't understand that he could see the future, and he would know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala had a special favor that he had shown upon Yusuf alayhi salam and his brother Binyamin alayhi salam as well. And so see those parallels, and similar to that, the story of Cain and Abel was mentioned yesterday, that Cain, he killed Abel, and all of this as a result of the fact that, according to the Quranic story, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala asked the two of them to make an offering. One of them, the offering of one brother, or the offering made by Abel was accepted. The offer made by Cain was not accepted. And as a result of that, Cain told Abel, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to kill you. And then eventually we know that he did kill his brother. Alhamdulillah, fortunate for Yusuf, his brothers did not kill him, but they wanted to kill him. And so these are the parallels. And so it goes, all of this. And so they go out, they take him out, they convince their father to allow Yusuf alayhi salam to go with them. And they take him to a faraway place, or a place at least where they know that he's not able to return or find his way back home. And in particular, what they do is they toss him down into a water hole, and then hope that eventually the caravan of people would come by and they will pick him up. That way, they would be spared from having to murder their brother. And so he's picked up eventually. Then they return to their father with his shirt or with his garment, and then they tell his father, "As you feared, the wolf, he ate him up. Here's proof." And they, according to the Tafsir, they slaughtered a sheep, and then they took the blood of the sheep and they placed it on the garment of Yusuf alayhi salam, as to give the impression that this was his blood. But his father, he knew them, it made no sense. Why would a wolf, and how would a wolf kill a boy and not bite through his clothing, right? And you bring back his garment, but they say, well, father, we even though we're being honest, you don't believe us. And so they took pity on him in that sense, but they weren't concerned. Remember, they weren't concerned so much about the fact that he would become sad, as he said, if Yusuf is farther away from me, I'll be sad, but also I'm afraid that the wolf is going to devour him. They responded, if a wolf devours him while we're so many, then we deserve any punishment that comes with that. We deserve to be destroyed as a result of that. And so he allowed them to go, and then this is what happens, unfortunately. So he says, well, that Allah is the one I will seek aid for against the things that you described about Yusuf and the loss of Yusuf and the misfortune that has happened to me, and that he's no longer in my presence, right? And so think about this is, there are many people who lose relatives. There's some people who lose relatives, and they're able to see them before they pass away. There's many people who are not able to see their relatives. Like some people, as we see missing children. Children go missing all the time. People kidnap them. Sometimes they kidnap them, they kill them as well. Some people, sometimes an airplane, it'll crash or just disappear and the remains of those laws were never found. Right? I mean, just imagine, just the anxiety and the sadness, the deep sadness that one would experience, not being able to see or touch the dead body of one's loved one. Right? It's one thing that they're past, that they're gone, but now it's like, well, you're not only gone, but I can't even confirm. It's like a dream. It's like, well, this is similar. To imagine this is fundamentally what's happening to the Prophet Yaqub alayhi salam. He's a prophet, but he's still a human being. So he has these emotions. So this is very devastating for him. But then think about the mother of Yusuf alayhi salam as well. How is he? What type of anguish is she going through in the process of this? Right? But these boys, it did this terrible, terrible thing to their brother and to their father. But it's all because they want to have exclusive attention of their father. So again, so they leave them in the well. And then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَجَاءَتْ سَيَّارَةٌ فَأَرْسَلُوا وَارِدَهُمْ فَأَدْلَى دَلْوَى قال يا بشرى هذا غلام وأسروه بضاعة والله عليم بما يعملون وشروه بثمن بخس دراهم معدودة وكانوا فيه من الزاهدين. And so then a caravan came, and they sent their water carrier, and he let down his pail. He said, hey, good news, it's a youth. And they concealed him as merchandise, but God is completely aware of whatever they do. And they sold him for a minor sum, a number of silver coins, as they were among those who thought him of little worth. Now, we're going to dissect the Arabic text here too, right? Now, first and foremost, of course, people who are studying Arabic, automatically you're going to see that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala uses this word sayyara, ja'a sayyaratun. And so when you first start studying Arabic, you learn, okay, sayyara is the word we use for car, right? Now, of course, this itself is not considered to be a miracle of the Quran, in that it utilized the word sayyara before cars existed. But sayyara in the verse is not a reference to cars, it's a reference to caravan. That's fundamentally what a sayyara is a caravan. And a caravan, of course, is a group of animals who are walking in the same direction and towards the same destination. And of course, with people as well, right? So sayyaratun, فَجَاءَ سَيَّارَةٌ. So a caravan came, فَأَرْسَلُوا وَارِدَهُم. And they sent their water carrier, right? So warid, is the individual who goes to a body of water to bring the water back, right? So as a matter of fact, the word sharia in Islam, the linguistic or the etymological roots of the word, it means mawridul ma, the place where water is taken from, or the place or the path to the water source, mawridul ma'i, right? And so also al-wird is fundamentally, it means the thing that you return to over and over and over. So people recite litanies, orad, right? Well, they subhanallah, alhamdulillah, Allahu Akbar, whatever type of wird you have, a wird of Quran, a wird of siyam, a wird of nawafil, ibadah, that they're connected to the word wird, right? So in the Arabic language too, when we think about imports and exports, the imports are called mawarid, the exports are called masadir, right? And so things that are sent out, So again, so they send their warid, their individual, their water carrier, to go get water, right? فَأَدْلَى دَلْوَى. And then he sends down his pail, his bucket, into the well. قال يا بشرى هذا غلام. He said, oh, good news, يا بشرى. And of course recited as well, one of the qira'ah is لا بشرايا, لا بشرايا, or لا بشري, يا بشراي, right? The different qira'at of it, يا بشرى. This is not someone's name, even though you will find in some tafsirs it will mention that some said that actually he was calling someone by the name Bushra, right? Ya Bushra, right? But that's actually was not mentioned here. That's not what's intended. Ya Bushra, oh, good news, right? Well, great news, right? Hada gulam, this is a youth, or gulam, this is a slave, or a gulam who is going to be turned into a slave, right? Because in the Arabic language, among the words utilized for slave is the word gulam. So in other words, they're speaking about the intention, right? This is a little boy who we can utilize or sell into slavery. Right? And they concealed him as merchandise. Asarruhu bida'atan, right? So bida'atan, tamyiz, right? So sarruhu. So the hu in sarruhu meaning that they concealed Yusuf alayhi salam as merchandise, for sale, right? And so it says that in the tafsir that those who actually concealed him were either the brothers of Yusuf or these individuals, the members of the caravan. In other words, so they go to the well and they pull him out of the well. Yusuf grabs onto the pail and they pull him up, right? So you'd imagine that he couldn't have been very heavy, right, at the time, because and this is an extremely important point because, of course, according to the story of the Bible, this all happens to Yusuf when he's 17 years old. I personally believe that he was much younger than that, right? So 17-year-olds, I'm not sure if they'll be, that light, for someone to pull them up. Of course, multiple people can assist them, so perhaps that would reconcile it. But so he pulls them up out of the well, and so when they head back to the caravan after going to get water, they return with Yusuf alayhi salam, and they hide him from the rest of the caravan because their intention is to sell him. Now another reading is that those who actually conceal him as bid'ah, as a merchandise, are Yusuf's brothers. In other words, they actually they cast him into the well, but then they leave, and watch from afar. And then the caravan comes. And when the caravan comes, they come back to the well and they claim that Yusuf alayhi salam was a runaway slave and they had been looking for him, but they were willing to sell Yusuf to the caravan. Right? So this is another reading, right? So those who actually conceal him were the brothers of Yusuf alayhi salam, as opposed to the members of the caravan. Wallahu alimun bima ya'malun. And Allah, but God is completely aware of whatever they do. In other words, their dhulm, their oppression, their injustice to Yusuf alayhi salam. And it said that Yusuf remained quiet when they made this claim because he was afraid that they were going to kill him. Right? وَشَرَوْهُ بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ. And they sold him. For a minor sum, right? بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ. بِثَمَنٍ نَاقِصٍ, as for an imperfect sum, right? Sharahu, shara yashri is a word in the Arabic language. It's what we call contronym, right? You have the words bay' with shira. And so al-bay' is usually utilized to mean to sell something. Al-shira is utilized often usually to mean to buy something. But they're contronyms, al-ma'ani abad, meaning that they mean one thing, but they also mean the opposite. So in this situation, shira, although typically utilized to mean to buy or to purchase, in this particular ayah, it means to sell. وَشَرَوْهُ, mean they sold him. They exchanged him. بِثَمَنٍ بَخْسٍ دَرَاهِمَ مَعْدُودَةٍ, right? Badal, right? So they sold him for a minor price, a small price, a number of silver coins. Darahim ma'duda, a dara'ima qalilatin, right? So because typically if the number of coins are a large amount, then you would weigh them. In addition to counting them, you would weigh them, right? So in this situation, they actually are simply counting the number of dirham they receive for him. And it said that the reason they do this, they only accept a small amount for him, is because they want to hurry up and rid themselves of Yusuf, because they're afraid, okay, if this is a runaway slave or this is a free person as well. This is if we say that the caravan are the ones who sell him for a small amount of money, then it's because they want to make sure that they can make a profit before his owners or his family, they actually find him, right? So this is understood, or if we take it this way. On the other hand, the brothers of Yusuf, also, it could be that they were the ones who sold him for this miserable price, this paltry price, right? Similar, وَكَانُوا فِيهِ مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ, and they were among those who thought of him a little worth. وَكَانُوا مِنَ الزَّاهِدِينَ فِيهِ, right? Those of those who actually really wanted to relinquish themselves of him, right? Because, again, they wanted to get back to their father and just be rid of Yusuf alayhi salam. Wallahu a'lam, right? So those are possibilities. وقال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه عسى أن ينفعنا أو نتخذه ولدا وكذلك مكنا ليوسف في الأرض ولنعلمه من تأويل الأحاديث والله غالب على أمره ولكن أكثر الناس لا يعلمون ولما بلغ أشده آتيناه حكما وعلما. The man from Egypt who bought him said to his wife, make his abode respectable. he may be useful to us, or we may adopt him as a son. Thus did we establish Yusuf in the land, so we could teach him the interpretation of stories, and God is master of the divine order, though most people do not know. قال الذي اشتراه من مصر لامرأته أكرمي مثواه. The one who bought him from Egypt for his wife. And this is actually is a possible reading, that in other words, the one from Egypt, the man from Egypt who bought him for his wife, he said to her, أكرمي مثواه. Make his abode respectable, or honor, or show generosity to his place of stay. Show generosity to his place of stay, and methwa, the place he's going to reside, he's going to spend the night sleeping, etc. Right? But that's not the dominant reading. The dominant reading among the Mufassirin is that not that he bought her for her, he bought Yusuf for her, but he bought Yusuf alayhi salam. Simply, he's the one who bought Yusuf. Right? And what he said, qala li amratihi, right? Not that ishtarahu li amratihi, not that he bought her for his wife, but he said to his wife, akrimi mathwahu. That's it, right? And so the one who bought him in this situation is what is called, later on is going to be mentioned, the Aziz. The Aziz, which is a title, right? Was the title, wasn't his name. It was a title. He was a member of the government of Egypt. And of course, Yusuf alayhi salam and his family are from Canaan. And so Yusuf ends up in Egypt now. And so the Aziz, some say he was of course, the second in command to the king, that where he was the head of the army. But anyway, he was a very powerful man. He was the Aziz of Misr, deputized by the king of Egypt. So he says to his wife, "Akrimi mathwahu," right? Show honor or be generous to his place of stay, or as translated here, make his abode respectable. Asa an yanfa'ana aw natakhidahu walada. Maybe he may be useful to us. He may benefit us, or we may adopt him as a son. We may take him as a son. And this was actually very normal, right, for people to do. You find a missing child, then sometimes a person, they would do to that child, they will either make that child into a slave, or they will adopt the child as one son. So think of Musa alayhi salam. So Musa's mother puts him on the Nile, sends him down to Nile, and then he ends up picked up by someone from the palace of Pharaoh, and he's taken into Pharaoh's kingdom, right? And treated as if he was a son. Treated as if he was a son, right? وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. And thus, so this is how we he said, and then he says, sorry, I'm looking at the translation, and وَكَذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّا لِيُوسُفَ فِي الْأَرْضِ. Thus do we establish Joseph in the land. ذَلِكَ مَكَّنَّاهُ, we gave him makana. In this way, we gave Yusuf a place in the earth. We gave him a stature in the earth. Right? In other words, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is utilizing all these experiences as a way to give Yusuf a makana in the land. Right? So in other words, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is make a home for him, but also to grant him rank. Right? So it starts here. So in this particular fashion, so Allah, the way that He deals with us is in a very subtle fashion. Right? And so we could teach him the interpretation of stories. So we grant him a home, a stable home, and also eventually we give him rank, but the rank is not going to come until we teach him from the ways of interpreting the stories, because that is how he's going to again become redeemed, just through his knowledge and through his piety. Wallahu ghalibun ala amrihi walakinna akthara an-nasi la ya'lamun. And Allah, or God, is master of the divine order. Or Allahu ghalibun ala amrihi. Then the he, amrihi, some say that he goes back to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is master of his own order. Or Allah is, or the he is a reference to Yusuf. That Allah ghalibun ala amri Yusuf. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is master of Yusuf's affair. So Allah is the master of his own affair, or he's master of the affair of Yusuf. Right? In other words, that Allah does with us whatever He pleases, right? And when Allah chooses a path for us, then there's going to be wisdom, there's going to be good at the end of that. Right? But most people, they don't know. وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ. وراودته التي هو في بيتها عن نفسه وغلقت الأبواب وقالت هيت لك قال معاذ الله إنه ربي أحسن مثواي إنه لا يفلح الظالمون. And when he attained maturity, we gave him wisdom and knowledge. This is how we recompense those who do good. So now he's in the home of the Aziz, and he's being cared for by the wife of the Aziz. He's growing up, and then Allah says, "Balagha ashuddahu," and once he reached his ashudda, his strongest stage, right? Ashudda Yusuf, right? Balagha ashuddahu. And so the thing interesting about this particular word is utilized in the Quran more than once. But the Mufassirun, they differ about exactly what's meant by it. What does it mean, or what age does one reach their ashudda, the highest or the strongest point, or their apogee in their existence, right? Like some of the Mufassirun said it means puberty, right? In other words, so if you say, so once Yusuf alayhi salam reached puberty, we gave him wisdom and knowledge, and then this is when the wife of the Aziz attempted to seduce him, as we'll see later. And so that if we say it means puberty, then of course this would undercut or undermine the claim that he was 17 when he was cast into the well, right? Because we can only imagine that he was so young that she wasn't attracted to him yet, right? So a number of years had to go by before she became attracted to him, right? So he's been raised in her home, or he's taking care of the home, and then eventually he grows up. Right. So one opinion is that it means he reaches puberty. Another is that it means 18 years old. Right. So that would be only if he started at 17, if they took him in or purchased him at 17, only 1 year later, now he becomes super attractive. Right. And that itself is unlikely as well. Right. So puberty. Some say 18. Some say 20. Some say ashuddahu is 25, some say 30, some say 33, some say between 30 and 40, some say 40, right? And so, and then another surah, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentions, balagha ashuddahu wa balagha arba'ina sana. And so some say ashuddahu means 40 years old. In other words, that the human being actually reaches their high point and their maturity at the age of 40. So ashuddahu means 40, even though Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilizes ashudda along with arba'in sana, which gives the impression that perhaps they're two different things as well. Or the context will perhaps determine the difference in the translation of it, right? So Yusuf reaches his ashuddahu. So we do know is that Yusuf has increased in his physiological development, so to the extent that he become very attractive, physically attractive, right? His body, he's muscular according to the hadith, and then all his face is a beautiful man in his face, right? And so, but also Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he's bulugh ashuddihi as well with regard to his knowledge. So he's at that point, وَلَمَّا بَلَغَ أَشُدَّهُ آتَيْنَاهُ حُكْمًا وَعِلْمًا. So Allah, we gave him wisdom and knowledge, right? And so the Mufassirun say that this is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, at this point, he chooses him as a prophet, right? Now, depending on what age we think he is at this point, right? What it seems like is that Yusuf alayhi salam is a prophet even before the normal age of becoming a prophet, similar to the case of Isa ibn Maryam alayhi salam. So because we know that, okay, said almost all the Anbiya become Anbiya around 40 years old, but Isa ibn Maryam was an exception to that. He became a prophet around 30 years old. This actually gives the impression, depending on what age we believe Yusuf to be at the time, that Yusuf alayhi salam was even younger than that, right? Because he perhaps was young in his 20s. And so Allah gave him hukm, meaning hikmah, gave him wisdom, and he gave him ilm, gave him knowledge, right? All right. So he would be one of the youngest prophets, And so that, and then Allah says, وَكَذَلِكَ نَجْزِي الْمُحْسِنِينَ, and that is how we recompense those who do good. We give reward those who do good. In other words, it's to suggest that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he gives wisdom and knowledge to people of ihsan. Right? He gives wisdom and knowledge to people of ihsan. Now, of course, Yusuf's wisdom and knowledge is of a prophetic nature, because you can't become a prophet. Right? No one can become a prophet. It just happens. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chooses you. right? And of course, there's La Nabiyya Ba'di Nabi Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam. After, the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is the last and final prophet, Khatim al-Nabiyyin. Rasulullah wa Khatim al-Nabiyyin. There's no prophet nor messenger to come after the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But when Allah was choosing prophets, istifa, when it was happening, ishtiba was happening, it was Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala making that selection, that you can't become a prophet through your effort, but you can develop wisdom. If you're a person of ihsan, then you can gain wisdom and gain knowledge, and Allah's reward for the ihsan, for your goodwill, for your pursuit of excellence, and that you'll be rewarded with wisdom and knowledge. And then he says, وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابَ وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. And she whose house he was in tried to seduce him against his will. She shut the doors and said, come. رَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا. رَاوَدَ. المراودة, this verb, رَاوَدَ يُرَاوِدُ, is a verb that fundamentally means to attempt to take away something that someone else owns through trickery. In this particular case, fundamentally, what this woman was trying to do was take away Yusuf's nafs, his own self, his very self, his physical body, right? And when part of that comes his soul, his conscience. وَرَاوَدَتْهُ الَّتِي هُوَ فِي بَيْتِهَا عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. So she was trying to take away his soul, take away his body for her own purposes, through a trick. وَغَلَّقَتِ الْأَبْوَابِ. And she shut the doors. And it said there were about 8 doors. She shut all of them. وَقَالَتْ هَيْتَ لَكَ. She said, هَيْتَ لَكَ, which is an expression, very interesting expression in the Arabic language. Scholars differ about the origin and the meaning of the word. That some say that hayta is from the language of the people of Haran. And so when they say hayta, it means ta'ala lak. Right? So come here, right? Talking to you, lak, an aqsiduk, and I mean you. Come to me. So it's read as hayta lak, or haytu lak, or hita lak, or hitu lak, right? So all of them have been mentioned in the form of qira'at, in relation to the different renditions, the different styles of reading. And so one meaning, one particular interpretation is that hayta actually means, it is short for tahiyyatu lak, that I am ready for you. I prepared myself for you. So say, come here, this is for you. Qalat hayta lak. Qala ma'adallah. He said, ma'adallah, God's protection. Right? In other words, a'udhu billahi, a'udhu ma'adallah. Wa'udhu billah. I seek refuge in God. Innahu Rabbi. Now, this is interesting way that this surah operates, because, for instance, if we think about, well, we're going to work up to the issue of the shirt, but Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in the surah utilizes words which can be understood in multiple ways. So here, innahu Rabbi. So here, he is my Lord. He is my master. I take refuge in God, for my master has made my abode agreeable. Right? So innahu Rabbi, really, he is my Lord. Who is my master? Who is my Rabb? Can mean master, meaning like the individual who owns the slave, right? Or is the creator, right? Rabbi, right? So it is both of them are possible in the Arabic language, right? So when Yusuf says Ma'adallah, he said Innahu Rabbi, he is my Lord, meaning Allah, or does he mean the woman's husband, the Aziz? Innahu Rabbi, ahsana mathwaya. He has beautified my stay. He had beautified my place of residence, right? Because he tells his wife, akrimi mathwahu, show generosity to his place of residence, or the place he's going to stay, honor him, or through what you do, beautify his place of stay, or make his stay pleasant. He says, Rabbi ahsana mathwaya. In other words, to say that, no, I cannot betray my Lord. And so my Lord means Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Of course, I can't betray Allah because he's my creator. He's my true Lord. But I also cannot betray my worldly Lord, in the sense that he himself has honored me to stay here. So even though Yusuf is a slave, he feels a sense of gratitude about the way he's been treated by his owner, right, in this situation. Now, of course, we can imagine that Yusuf at any moment could have attempted to try to find his way back home, but probably he didn't know how to do that for multiple reasons, right, because of his youth, etc., right. But fundamentally, he feels a sense of commitment or a sense of fidelity, right, to the man who took him in, who purchased him and took him in and actually treated him well, right, in his home. And so he says to her, how can you betray my master? He's my master. So he's your husband, he's my master. And he's done well to me, And so, إِنَّهُ لَا يُفْلِحُ الظَّالِمُونَ, that the oppressors, wrongdoers, do not succeed. They don't succeed. He said, I take refuge in God, for my master has made my abode agreeable. Surely oppressors will not succeed. Oppressor. No, how is he an oppressor? He's an oppressor in that he is returning ill for good, right? So the good that was done to him by his master, right, was that he took him in and he treated him well, made sure he's well fed, taken care of, and well clothed, bathed, etc., has a good place to stay, right? And for him to actually sleep with his wife would be an injustice to him, that you belong to someone else. But also, of course, he's saying that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he himself also has beautified my place of stay. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because he's the one who touched the hearts of all these people, right? So in other words, he could have ended up in the hands of a wretched slave owner, right, who was very abusive, right, who let him sleep in a place which was not very nice and didn't feed him that often, right? But the opposite happened. He actually ends up becoming a slave of one of the heads of state, right, a rich man, right? So if he's a rich man, to be a slave of a rich man is much better than being a slave of a poor man, right? So it will be a dhulm, right, in this situation. But Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he is the one who touched his heart, so touched the heart of this man, who made this man look at me in this fashion, that he originally considered perhaps even making me his son. And he sort of treated me halfway as a slave and halfway as a son, to be totally honest, right? And how could I betray him now, right? How could I have betrayed him? Simply because he's not here. Because those who are wrongdoers, the oppressors, they do not succeed. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَن رَأَىٰ بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ كَذَلِكَ لِنَصْرِفَ عَنْهُ السُّوءَ وَالْفَحْشَاءَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ عِبَادِنَا الْمُخْلَصِينَ واستبق الباب وقدت قميصه من دبر وألف يا سيدها لدى الباب قالت ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. Yet she did desire him, and he desired her, but for the fact that he saw evidence of his Lord. Thus it was so that we might divert evil and indecencies from him, for he was one of our purified servants. The two raced to the door, and she tore his shirt from behind, and they found her husband at the door. She said, what is the due of one who desires evil of your wife, but imprisonment or torture? قال هي راودتني عن نفسي وشهد شاهد من أهلها إن كان قميصه قد من قبل فصدقت وهو من الكاذبين وإن كان قميصه قد من دبر فكذبت وهو من الصادقين. He said, she tried to seduce me, and a witness from her household testified, if his shirt is torn from the front, then she is telling the truth and he is a liar. But if his shirt is torn from the back, then she is lying and he is telling the truth. Now going back to the beginning, وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ, and she did desire him. She had an inclination towards him, that she had passion for him. And so the ulama generally say in this ayah, they prefer that if you're going to recite this ayah in salah, especially, that when you recite it, you stop here. وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ, and then begin وَهَمَّ بِهَا لَوْلَا أَن رَأَىٰ بُرْهَانَ رَبِّهِ. Because when you stop there, fundamentally what it does is place the burden mainly upon her, right? It's to say that that she desired him. And so many of the ulama, they find it distasteful to read it as وَلَقَدْ هَمَّتْ بِهِ وَهَمَّ بِهَا, right? That he desired him, she desired him, and he desired her. because they feel that this itself is a type of disparagement towards Yusuf alayhi salam, who happens to be the Prophet alayhi salam. It's suggesting that he himself inclined to commit sin, right? And so for this reason, some of them say, okay, well, actually, hamma biha is actually the jawab, or the answer to Lola an ra'a burhana rabbihi, that had he not seen the proof of his Lord, he would have desired her as well, right? Yeah, but that grammatically, as scholars like Zamakhshari and others say, that in itself doesn't hold in the Arabic language, because Lola, the jawab, the answer clause, doesn't usually come before, or it doesn't come before the actual condition itself, right? So in other words, so this condition, Lola an ra'a burhana rabbi, lo an ra'a burhana rabbihi, had he not seen the proof or the evidence of his Lord, actually the answer clause is actually deleted, is not mentioned. But it's understood is that had he not seen the evidence of his Lord, he would have fallen victim to her desires, right? So that so it's not, it can't be held up to say, okay, well, hamma biha, it actually is a response to Lola and ra'a burhana rabbihi. Rather, there's nothing problematic, according to another opinion, that there's nothing problematic about the idea that Yusuf alayhi salam was attracted to her. Right? If anything, his attraction to her is a greater sign of his saintliness, and that we don't praise an individual who actually says no to an offer, or no to an attempt to be seduced, if that individual doesn't have desire to do the thing that they've been offered. I mean, there's a difference between an individual who refuses to drink wine, although they may have the desire to do so, and someone who doesn't drink wine simply because it wasn't available, right? Or they just didn't have the desire to drink it. They never had it before, right? The one who actually has the taste for something and then resists that urge gets a greater reward than an individual who actually just doesn't have the urge to begin with, right? So Yusuf alayhi salam wasn't an angel, even though we can see later that the woman, they call him an angel, but he was not an angel. He was Nabi, but also a bashar, that he was a mortal human being. So in other words, so Yusuf, of course, did not have the desire, inclination to commit zina, adultery, or fornication, but perhaps he would say that he had the desire to have gratification, sexual gratification with a woman who he's attracted to, but he could not, because she himself belonged to someone else. Had it not been that he saw the burhan of his Lord. So again, Lord is utilized, and it can be understood in two different ways. The burhan rabbihi, meaning that the proof of God, meaning that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala said that such a thing is unethical to do, and so he saw the proof and knew the proof of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or the evidence of his Lord, meaning his worldly Lord, his worldly Lord, that he saw that his Lord was coming, right? And so had it not been for that, he would have inclined towards it, would have had the desire to do what she wished, right? Had he not seen that. In this way, do we avert from him as-su' wal-fahsha, evil, right? We avert from him as-su' wal-fahsha, the evil and indecencies, right? So fahisha is usually utilized synonymous with what we call zina, and as-su is utilized, it can be a reference to evil in general, but it could be the precursors to zina, sort of, foreplay, kissing, things like the touching, those type of things. And so in this manner, does Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he avert from Yusuf as-su wal-fahsha innahu min ibadina mukhlasin, because verily he's from our purified servants. There's a difference between someone being mukhlas and someone being mukhlas. So a person can be mukhlas, sincere, because of one's efforts, right? They're trying to remove or impurities from our conscience and from our being, our moral being. You're mukhlas, that you're trying to worship Allah, mukhlisina lahu din, directing your worship only at Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. But when one is mukhlas, that means that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has spared the individual, has made the individual obedient and compliant with one's commandments, right? And so this is why Shaitan, when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grants him respite, he says, فَبِعِزَّتِكَ لَأُغْوِيَنَّهُمْ أَجْمَعِينَ إِلَّا عِبَادَكَ مِنْهُمُ الْمُخْلَصِينَ. That by your might, oh God, by your might, I swear by your might, that I am going to beguile all of them except for your mukhlasin servants, the servants who are mukhlasin, those who are protected or purified by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, right? So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has said that Yusuf was from the mukhlasin, and so it means that this is a form of isma, a type of protection, a divine protection given to Yusuf by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So Allah spares him from disgrace and ensures he doesn't fall into sin. And so they raced towards the door. And so remember before it mentioned doors plural, right? Right? So she closed all the doors, and then here it says they raced towards the door. But there it mentioned many now mentions a single door, meaning that there was one door out, and so that particular door, Yusuf was trying to get out of that particular door. And in the process, she tears his garment. And they encounter her husband or her master, right? Even right? So this is, actually emphasizing the issue of hierarchy in the relationship, so her sayyid, and a woman or a wife would be the sayyida of her husband as well, right? But he's a sayyid, right, of her. And so we find her sayyid, her master, at the door. But notice it didn't say Sayyida Huma, right? That they encountered their Sayyid, their master at the door, because Yusuf's real master is Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It's okay to refer to the human being as the Rabb of an individual, but not the Sayyid of an individual. Of course, we know that there's some permission given to that when we talk about, of course, the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, right? But ألف يا سيدها لدى باب قال ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا إلا أن يسجن أو عذاب أليم. So then now she says, what is the due of one who desires evil of your wife, but imprisonment or torture? What is the reward? ما جزاء من أراد بأهلك سوءا. So ahlik, is ahl in the Arabic language utilized often to refer to one's zawja. So you use family to your family, what to do to your family. It means with your wife. Su'an, who means ill with your wife. And so she speaks in a general sense as opposed to saying, Yusuf, what should happen to Yusuf? Yusuf did this to me. What do you think he deserves? Other than to be imprisoned or to receive a painful punishment, right? Such as being whipped, whipped and tormented or tortured. And so she's trying to appeal to his ego. She's trying to make him jealous. She's trying to force his hand, because now there's a matter of dishonor involved. So this is the Aziz, and his wife is now accused of accusing her slave and his slave of trying to rape her, right? And so now if word gets out, now out of his pride, he has to respond to this, right? But the Yusuf alayhi salam, because naturally you want to avoid punishment, he said, "He rawadatni an nafsi." No, the opposite. She tried to seduce me. It's her. She is the aggressor, right? I was not the aggressor. She is the aggressor. And this it teaches is that when you're accused of things, especially things that are as serious as this, it's an obligation upon you to defend yourself. That you can't just allow people to just go around and say whatever they want. No, you have to defend yourself. Say, no, she accused me. And then a member of her family, a witness from her family, he testified. Now, what's interesting here is that he refers to this man, this person, as a witness from her family. Now, we know that no one was there other than Yusuf and Zulaykha, which is the name of the wife of the Aziz. It's the two of them together. Now, there's a narration this week that mentions that there was actually a little baby in the room with them. And that baby witnessed what was happening. And the baby spoke up, and in its infancy, it was a miracle that the baby spoke and then said, "Oh, no, this is what you need to do," which really doesn't make sense, because if the baby spoke, then the matter would be settled from the very beginning, right? So, but that's the narration that's out there in the Tafsir books, right? But it definitely can't be that. Some say that this particular witness from her family was one of her cousins, Ibn Ammiha, paternal or maternal cousin. Yeah, most narrations say it was her paternal cousin. And so Allah mentions that it calls him a witness from her family, which itself is another source of vindication for Yusuf, because what if he was a witness from someone who's not a family member? But now usually a family members want to protect the honor of other family members. But here we have Yusuf saying, no, it was her coming after me. Now a family member says, well, here's an idea. Here's an idea. He doesn't outright say that Yusuf is telling the truth. He doesn't say that she's telling the truth, right? But he says, here's an idea, because they notice there's a tear, that Yusuf's garments are torn, right? Or one, as the Tafsir says, well, actually, they heard the tear, and so they were rushed to the door. And so he was with the Aziz, and the Aziz took him as one of his consultants, one of his advisors, right? And so they come in, and so in kana qamisuhu qudda min qubalin fasadaqat, right? So if his shirt happens to be torn from the front, then she's telling the truth. And he's a liar. He's the liar. But if his garment happens to be torn from behind, then she has spoken falsely, and he is the truthful one, right? And so, in other words, of course, this is what we call circumstantial use of circumstantial evidence, right? It's not a ironclad proof that Yusuf was being aggressed upon and that she was the aggressor, right? But it is a strong proof here, right? So he denies the claim. She accuses, he denies the claim, and then he said, okay, well, we'll think about this. We look at his clothing. None of her clothing are being torn. His clothes are torn. Hers are not, right? So either he's coming after her or he's running away from her, right? So he has this test that he wants to do. فَلَمَّا رَأَى قَمِيصَهُ قُدَّ مِنْ دُبُرٍ قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ. So when he looked at the shirt, it was torn from the back. He said, this was a trick of you women. Your trick is serious indeed, right? So here, they notice, again, as the verse says, that it was torn from behind, right? But as the Mufassirun say, some of them say specifically that this is not ironclad evidence that Yusuf was being aggressed upon. Excuse me. Of course, naturally, it could have been the opposite. We know it was not the opposite because of the fact that later they confessed, that it was all a big lie, right? But the response here, قَالَ إِنَّهُ مِنْ كَيْدِكُنَّ, that this is from your trick. This is one of your tricks. This is one of your tricks, right? And so, of course, this is one of those controversial verses. إِنَّ كَيْدَكُنَّ عَظِيمٌ, said, and your trick is serious indeed, or your tricks are serious indeed. Or, in other words, the ulama generally, when they read this, they understand this to mean that whoever was speaking, whether it be the Aziz or be the man who is a member of her house, the wife's family, right? Even though there's narration that says that she was also the cousin of the Aziz, Wallahu alam, right? But anyway, regardless of who was speaking, that they were saying something about women in general, right? And that is to suggest that the type of trickery or cunning that women utilize itself can be much more effective than the cunning that men utilize in order to overwhelm men as well, right? So in other words, say, innahu min kaydikunna, right? So some say this was the shahid who said this. The person, her cousin, said this to her. This is one of your tricks, the type of tricks that women utilize, Then some say, no, it was the Aziz who said this to her. Innahu min kaydikunna. This is one of your tricks, or the tricks of you women, right? And he was said that because she said to him, what should happen to someone who wants to do ill to your family, to your wife, other than to be placed in the prison or to be punished severely, right? So in other words, that she saw a way out, right? She already had a plan together, right? She says, I want this man, I'm going to seduce him, and if he doesn't give me what I want, right? Or if we get caught in the process, I'm going to say he raped me. Say he raped me, right? right? But this test that they performed led them to conclude, okay, well, no, this is that you're the one who's in wrong. In the human right? And so what we need to understand here is that this is not saying that women specifically have kaid. They're the only ones who actually have tricks and plots, right? That they employ. This is not saying that at all. Men have kaid as well. We know that. But the fundamental point here is that the kaid of women, the kaidun nisa, can actually be much more effective at overwhelming a man than the kaid of men. In the human kunna, that this is from one of your tricks. In the kaidakun azim, in the kaidakun azim. And as a matter of fact, just said that some of the ulama used to say that they fear the kaids or the tricks of women more than they fear the tricks of shaitan. Why? Because in the Quran, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, he says, "Inna kaida shaitani kana da'ifa," that the kaid or the tricks of shaitan are weak. But here Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, "Inna kaidakun azim," that your tricks are immense, they're magnificent, they're great, right? These are, significant, right? Things, they're serious. And so now, of course, one would ask and say, well, you just said that Allah didn't say this, that this was said by either the witness from her family or the individual from her family who came up with the idea of how to exonerate Yusuf, or from the Aziz, so how can you say that Allah said that? Well, okay, even if we say Allah didn't say it, one can ask, why did Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala think it was appropriate to include that, right, in his book, right? And we definitely know from experience that there is something to the way that women can connive compared to the way that men themselves seek to undermine other people's efforts as well. That men, eventually will utilize physical force in order to undermine one's efforts. Women don't need to do so. Women have a different type of power than men do. Of course, their physical attraction is part of that, but then also they can be very good manipulators, right? Of course, the women who are much more intelligent. Of course, if they're trying to get their way, women who know how to finesse their husbands into getting from them what they want, right? Can do so in a way that men quite often can do so. So I know, of course, it's probably going to lead to a lot of conversation, but it's in the Quran, right? It's there, right? But then he says, Yusuf a'rid an hadha wastaghfiri li dhanbik innaki kunti min al-khati'in. So he says, Joseph, turn away from this, and you, wife, seek forgiveness for your sin. It was you who were in the wrong. Yusuf a'rid an hadha. So Yusuf here, we think of the Arabic, this is what we call al-munada, or nida, right? But the harf of nida is eliminated. Ya Yusufu. But the norm is that when you're trying to call someone and get someone's attention who is in your presence, and you already notice that they are attending to you, there's no need to utilize harf of nida like ha or a or ya ayyuha, right? Because they're right there. They're already paying attention. So he says, Yusufu a'rid an hadha. Oh, Yusuf, turn away from this. Meaning, Yusuf, ignore what has happened. Don't repeat it. Don't bring it up. Don't talk about this publicly. Keep this between us. Keep this incident between us. And then he turns to his wife and says, and you, or her cousin says to her, and seek forgiveness for your sin. Seek forgiveness from who? If it's her cousin saying, seek forgiveness from your husband, from the Aziz. But if the Aziz is asking her this, he says, seek forgiveness for your sin from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Because although they were idolaters, they did believe in the creator up on high, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So seek forgiveness for your sin. Then he says, Innaki kunti min al-khati'in. It was you who were in the wrong, that you were among the khati'in. And what's interesting about the use of a khati'in here is that scholars like Zamakhshari and Imam al-Baghawi, Razi, they mention this, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala could have said, Innaki kunti min al-khati'at, that you are among those who do wrong who happen to be feminine, right? He could have utilized the feminine plural, but he utilized the masculine plural. Some say the reason that he utilizes the masculine plural is because he wanted to be inclusive, place her in the category of people which combines both male and female, right? Others say the reason that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala utilizes the masculine plural here is because most of the people who are actually guilty of the sin she was guilty of happened to be men. Right? And so in this situation is the sin of lust, right, that she's guilty of, right? And so for that reason, it's innaki kunti min al-khati'in. At any rate, this is where we're going to stop today. Inshallah, next Saturday we'll continue. We'll return to this, and we'll hope that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, He blesses all of you and for the rest of your day. As I mentioned before, what we want to do in the future is that, so as we get through the surah, once we come toward the close of the surah, then I have a special session for Q&A. But also what you can do is between one week and the other, and the next weekend, is you can send any questions that you may have which you feel were unanswered about the story, inshallah, that I'll try to answer as well prior to my lecture about the subsequent verses that will be spoken about in the following lesson, inshallah. Wa sallallahu sayyidina Muhammad wa ala alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam tasliman kathira wa subhanakallahumma wa bihamdika ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah wa barakatuh. Ramadan Mubarak wa taqabbalallahu minkum as-siyam wa qiyam wa qira'at al-Quran.